Hey everyone, Nick Fuentes had a rooting interest in the Iran war.
Pray for Iran. Pray for the designs of the Jews to fail. That's all we could do. Iran is fighting for the whole world right now.
I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and whoa, that's strong stuff, right? I'm not even sure Jane Fonda prayed for the North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. So, what Fuentes is saying there is symptomatic of how the so called woke right, for lack of better phrase, has a very dark view of its own country. Now, why is that? Because most of these people portray themselves as super nationalists, and usually nationalists are very into their own country rather than thinking it's a twisted and dark place, such that you might actually be rooting for the enemy in a no kidding shooting war. So let's go through the reasons I think we are seeing this phenomenon, because it's very important to understand. And this is obviously driving a fierce ideological war within the right. I think first factor is the isolationist right overlap with a lot of these people thought they controlled Donald Trump. So they thought Trump was an isolationist the way they are isolationist. And it was never true. He was never an isolationist. And then also in the second term, he's actually been hyperactive in terms of foreign policy. So this led to extreme disappointment, which led on the one hand to a massive reevaluation of Donald Trump. Now, yes, Donald Trump made wild threats in the run up to the ceasefire with Iran. Are we really shocked by that? Do we not remember fire and fury with North Korea in the first term? And he also dropped an F bomb in a Truth Social post on Easter morning. Bad. Shouldn't have done it. But also, we're shocked. We think he's usually very polite in all his communications and observes all the norms. No, no. And in fact, members of the woke right, like Tucker Carlson, they celebrated this stuff or looked past it or said it had benefits to Trump. And anyone noticing this aspect of its character and might have downsides, that they were quislings and weaklings and just didn't get Donald Trump, or they're opposed to his voters. Now, Tucker Carlson sounds like a so-called member of the Committee to Save the World during the first term. This was the establishment types that considered Trump a danger and thought he had to be controlled. Now, Tucker is not an establishment type, but he's a representative of the woke right who thinks Trump is a danger and has to be controlled. Here he was calling on people around Trump to get the nuclear codes to stop a potential nuclear conflict.
Figure out the codes on the football yourself, because everything hangs in the balance right now. This is not hysteria. This is 100% real.
Now, there's another way to deal with the disappointment with Trump, not mutually exclusive with the one we just talked about, which is to believe that he's being controlled by shadowy forces that happen to be Jews. The isolationist right has had a major focus on this big New York Times report on Trump's decision to go to war with Iran. So they focus on various details of the story. Bibi Netanyahu comes for a very quiet meeting with Donald Trump in the run-up to the war. They're sitting in the Situation Room, and Trump is not at the head of the table the way the President of the United States is in that room or any other room. They sit across from each other as though they're equals around that table. Netanyahu provides a very optimistic case of what might happen if the U.S. and Israel launch a war, especially with regard to possible regime change. And then a little less focus on this, but the story describes how Trump's aides, a lot of them, they don't believe the optimistic take on regime change, but they don't forcefully push back against Trump, who's obviously inclined to launch a military operation against Iran. So what's the big takeaway from this? Who decides what foreign leaders Trump is going to meet with? Donald Trump. Who decides where the foreign leaders sit in the Situation Room if they're meeting there with them? Donald Trump. Who decides whether or not to believe what a foreign leader is saying about a military operation or anything else? Donald Trump. Who's created a situation where he has a lot of aides around him who are too deferential or too afraid to give them their frank views on important things? Donald Trump. This is all Donald Trump. But the woke right wants to deflect from that because it's uncomfortable for them, some of them still, to be too critical of Donald Trump, and then also more deeply They are conspiracy theorists. Now, conspiracies obviously sometimes are real. Going back in history, there was a conspiracy to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. There was a conspiracy to assassinate Archduke Ferdinand. More recently, there was a conspiracy to cover up the origins of COVID at that Wuhan lab in China. There's a conspiracy to cover up Joe Biden's true mental and physical state. All that is true. But if you see deeper conspiracies everywhere, what happens, you begin to have an extremely dark interpretation of your own government. It's not just that the people running the government are weak. It's not just that they're incompetent. It's not just that they are, yes, in certain situations and circumstances, ill intentioned. No, it's that they're evil. This is why it's such a key part of the worldview of a Tucker Carlson or a Candace Owens that the United States government killed JFK, assassinated a president of the United States, and have been lying about it ever since. And Tucker Carlson sees these kind of conspiracies everywhere, right? The USS Liberty, that spy ship that was accidentally and tragically shot up by Israeli forces during the Six-Day War, that was a deliberate attack by Israel, and the US government was in on it and knew about it and is still covering it up. Chemtrails. The government is using commercial aviation to spread these chemicals in the atmosphere for dastardly reasons. The government might be covering up the real killer of Charlie Kirk. Obviously, this is a cracked lunatic obsession of Candace Owens. But once you're believing these kind of things, our government is not just wrong. Our government doesn't need checks and just need checks and balances. It's not just that it can't be trusted in every circumstance. It is evil. It needs to be stopped, including its influence abroad. And this is how you get the woke right linking up with the woke left, with the anti-American left, and the likes of, say, a Glenn Greenwald. So in the same vein we're just talking about, here too in U.S. foreign policy, it's not just that we're overly ambitious, that we're overly idealistic, that we can be naive, that we can overestimate what we can actually achieve in the world, and it sometimes backfires and we should be more modest. All those are totally legitimate points, and to some extent, I would agree with them. No, it's that the United States is an overweening imperialistic power that exercises a malign influence in the world. This is the classic new left critique of American power that's also migrated into elements of the new right. The U.S. needs to be stopped abroad. U.S. power needs to be taken down a notch. And I think this is what is behind Carlson's somewhat wishful interpretation that the U.S. predominance around the world is over, and we now live in a multipolar world. And by the way, American Protestant Christianity has also been destroyed.
And so you're watching the end of the global American empire, the unipolar world, that was great, by the way, while it lasted, but it's over. And you're watching the end of whatever American Protestant Christianity, one of the greatest and most positive forces in the history of this world, whatever it became after the Second World War, which is something unrecognizable.
So you add this all up. Donald Trump is dangerous. He's controlled by malign forces. The United States government itself has been controlled by malign forces going back decades and decades and decades now. And the United States is too powerful abroad. You get all that toxic stew together, and that's how you get this kind of bizarre rant from Tucker Carlson.
Is it possible that what you're watching is a very stealthy yet incredibly effective attack on what, from a Christian perspective, is the true faith, belief in Jesus? Is it possible the president sees this in bigger terms? Sees this as the fulfillment of something or the elevation to some higher office beyond President of the United States?
So Carlson's suggesting there that Donald Trump might be part of some satanic project. Now, what country around the world famously considers the United States the great Satan? Right? Iran. And then he put on top of this that for a lot of these people, Israel is the main problem in the Middle East and perhaps in the international system broadly, and here in our domestic politics as well. So Iran might not be the greatest country in the world, but at least it opposes our ally Israel. So it's a perverse thinking that the enemy of our ally must be our friend, at least in some sense. So this is how you get Nick Fuentes saying that we should pray for Iran. No thanks. I'll pray for the President of the United States. I'll pray for our service members, and I'll pray for the United States of America, no matter what the woke right says. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.